You need to know the truth before I go. Those were the words that changed everything. What my grandfather revealed in his final moments wasn't just a secret. It was something that would completely rewrite our family's history. And the worst part, nobody was prepared to hear it. But let me tell you from the beginning, because this story, it will leave you speechless. It was a typical Tuesday when I received the call. My mother, her voice choked with emotion, simply said, "It's today. Come quickly." I didn't need to ask anything. I knew. After 6 months battling an aggressive cancer, my grandfather Joachim was in his final moments. I dropped everything at the office, didn't even say goodbye to my colleagues. I grabbed my car keys and ran out the door. Throughout the journey to the hospital, my mind was a mess. Childhood memories flooded my thoughts like disordered flashes. My grandfather teaching me to ride a bicycle. The endless afternoons in his workshop, where he repaired old clocks with a patience I never understood the source of. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with machine oil that seemed to define who he was. But there was something I had never been able to understand about him. Joachim had always been a reserved man. Too quiet even. There was a sadness in his eyes that no smile could completely disguise. As if he carried an invisible weight that no one else could see. My grandmother passed away when I was only 8 years old. And after that shadow in his eyes intensified. How many times did I try to ask him about his past? About how he met my grandmother, about his life before he got married, about his family that we never met. He always skillfully deflected the subject. He would change the subject, make up excuses about needing to do something urgent, or simply remain silent until the discomfort made me give up. I arrived at the hospital with my heart racing. The corridors seemed endless. The smell of disinfectant mixed with that characteristic hospital aroma, which is indescribable, but everyone recognizes, made me nauseous. When I entered the room, the scene broke me. There he was, the man who always seemed indestructible, now as fragile as old paper. My mother was sitting beside the bed, holding his hand. My 2 uncles were also there, more to the side, with expressions of those who had already cried all they were entitled to. "Daughter!" Grandpa Joachim's voice was a hoarse whisper. He looked at me with those still penetrating eyes, despite his weakness. "You came." "Of course I came, Grandpa. I wasn't going to leave you alone." I approached the bed. His hand was cold when I took it. My uncles looked at me with a strange expression. There was something in the air, a tension that went beyond the obvious pain of saying goodbye. It was as if everyone was expecting something, or fearing something. "I need to say something," he said with difficulty. Each word seemed to require a monumental effort. "I gathered you all here because I can't leave without saying it." My mother squeezed his hand tighter. "Dad, there's no need to strain yourself now. Rest." But he shook his head with a determination that was surprising for someone so weak. "No, Beatrice. You've kept this to yourself your whole life. If I don't speak now..." He coughed, and the sound sent shivers down my spine. "You'll live without knowing who you really are." Absolute silence filled the room. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. I looked at my mother, who was pale. My uncles exchanged nervous glances. What on earth was he about to reveal? "The truth is..." He took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to jump off a cliff. "I am not Joachim Silva." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. "What?" was all I could manage to say. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, tears were streaming down his face. I had never seen my grandfather cry, not even at Grandma's funeral. Seeing that was like witnessing a mountain crumble. "My real name is Enrique Almeida dos Santos. And before I became who you know me, I made a terrible mistake. A mistake that changed everything." My mother let go of his hand, bringing both hands to her mouth. "Dad, what are you talking about? Let me explain everything. From the beginning." And then began the most unbelievable story I had ever heard in my life. A story that seemed straight out of a movie, but was terrifyingly real. Every word that came out of his mouth was like a bomb exploding everything we thought we knew about our family. He recounted that he was born in 1943 into an extremely wealthy family in São Paulo. His grandfather, who would be our great-great-grandfather, had been one of the largest coffee producers in the state. The Almeida dos Santos family owned property, had political influence, and a respected surname. Enrique grew up in a large house in Jardim Europa, studied at the best schools, and never knew what it was like to be in need. But I was a spoiled brat, arrogant. I thought the world owed me everything. At 22, in 1965, Enrique was in love with a girl named Laura. She came from a humble family and worked as a primary school teacher. His family obviously disapproved, but young Enrique didn't care. He was blinded by passion. They met in secret, planning to run away together as soon as he turned 23 and received part of the inheritance his grandfather had left him. But then something happened that changed everything. He continued, his voice growing weaker. The doctor had entered the room and was observing everything attentively, checking the monitors. But even he seemed captivated by the story. On the night of March 15, 1965, I was driving back from dinner. He paused for a long time, so long that I thought he had fainted. But no, he was just gathering his strength to continue. It was raining heavily, those typical São Paulo summer rains that turn everything into chaos. I'd been drinking, not much, but enough to be reckless. I was driving too fast, wanting to get home quickly. And then, her voice completely broke. Then I saw the boy too late. The room became freezing. He appeared out of nowhere. Or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I tried to brake, but the road was wet. The car skidded and I hit him head-on. My mother was crying silently. My uncle Roberto had his hand on his forehead, in disbelief. I was paralyzed, unable to process what I was hearing. I stopped the car. I got out and ran. He was lying in the middle of the street. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He was bleeding a lot. I picked him up, shouted for help, but there was nobody on that street. The rain was falling so hard I could barely see. And then, he stopped breathing, right there in my arms. The heart monitor started beeping faster. The doctor approached, but Grandpa, or was it Uncle Enrique, gestured for just one more minute. I panicked, totally. I didn't think straight. I put his body back on the sidewalk, got in the car and ran. I just ran like a coward. He sobbed, and the sound was painful to hear. I arrived home soaked and trembling. My father immediately realized something was wrong. I told him everything. And do you know what he did? He told me to take a hot bath and go to sleep, that he would take care of everything. And he took care of it. Enrique's father used all the family's power and money to make the problem disappear. Bribes were paid. Non-existent witnesses were fabricated to blame a phantom driver. The car was destroyed and replaced. In a week, it was as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't forget. I saw that boy's face every night. I later found out his name was Carlos. Carlos Pereira, the only son of a widowed washerwoman. His mother was devastated, driven mad with grief. And I continued my life of privilege as if nothing had happened. 3 months later, I asked Laura to marry me. I thought that building a new life, having a family, would make me forget. But he didn't forget. Guilt gnawed at him from the inside. Laura realized something was wrong, but he never told her. They set the wedding for December of that year. A lavish ceremony with over 300 guests, in the most elegant church in São Paulo. A week before the wedding, I received an anonymous letter. The letter simply said, "I know what you did. You don't deserve to be happy." Enrique became completely paranoid. He began investigating who could have sent it. He secretly hired a private investigator. And he discovered something that completely destroyed him. Laura knew. She had found out everything through a friend who worked at the police station. And what's more, she was planning to expose him publicly on their wedding day. I don't know if she was really going to do it or if it was just a threat to force me to confess. I'll never know. Because 3 days before the wedding, I ran away. He simply vanished. He took some money, fake documents he obtained through dubious contacts, and disappeared in the middle of the night. He left everything behind. Family, fortune, Laura, his entire life. I traveled to the countryside. I moved to a different city every 2 months. I lived by doing odd jobs, sleeping in cheap boarding houses. For years, I lived like a ghost. In 1969, he arrived in a small town in the interior of Parana. It was there that he met my grandmother, Anna. She worked in a bakery. She was simple, kind, and didn't ask questions about his past. Enrique introduced himself as Joaquim Silva, a mechanic by profession who had lost his family in a car accident. Anna saved me. She gave me a reason to try to be a better person. But I never told her the truth. Never. They got married in 1970. They had 3 children, my mother Beatriz and my uncles Roberto and Marcos. Joaquim worked hard, built the watchmaking workshop, and made an honest living. But the guilt never went away. Every clock I repaired was an attempt to go back in time. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. The doctor stood beside the bed, clearly concerned, but also mesmerized by the confession. When Anna died, I almost killed myself, because she left without knowing who I really was. She died loving a lie. My mother was sobbing openly now. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? Because he was too cowardly. And because the more time passed, the more impossible it became. How could I look you in the eyes and tell you that you were the children of a murderer, of a runaway, of a liar? But the story didn't end there. 3 months ago, when I learned I was dying, I hired a lawyer. I asked him to investigate what happened to the boy's mother, to my family from the family, to everything. And what he discovered shocked him. The boy's mother, Dona Conceição, had truly gone mad with grief. She spent years in psychiatric institutions. She died in 1983, alone and forgotten. The Almeida dos Santos family lost their entire fortune in the 1980s due to mismanagement and corruption. Enrique's father died bankrupt in 1987. Laura never married. She became an activist for the rights of traffic accident victims until she died of cancer in 2010. And the house where the accident happened? It was demolished in 2000. They built a park in its place. Carlos Pereira Park. A tribute to the boy. But there's one thing you need to know. He gestured to his uncle Marcos, who was standing nearby. In the nightstand drawer, there's an envelope. Marcos opened the drawer with trembling hands. He took out a thick yellow envelope. Inside were several documents. And a letter. I read that aloud, Grandpa requested. His voice now almost inaudible. Marcos began to read. The letter was addressed to Carlos Pereira's family. It was a plea for forgiveness. Detailed, agonizing, honest. He admitted everything. He apologized for the crime, for the escape, for the cowardice. And he explained that he had left all his property and assets in his will to be sold, and the money donated to institutions that support victims of traffic accidents and their families. Everything? My mother asked, astonished. Dad, but what about us? You have your lives, your jobs, your homes. You don't need the blood money of a coward. Silence. A silence so profound that the sound of the heart monitor seemed deafening. But there's something else in these documents, he continued. The investigation discovered that the Pereira family has living relatives. A niece of Dona Conceição. She lives in Curitiba. She's 42 years old. A teacher, just like her aunt's dream. He looked at us one by one with an intensity that cut through us. I want you to find her. Deliver the letter. Contains the truth. I want her to know that the man who killed her cousin and destroyed her aunt suffered every day of his life. It's not much. It doesn't compensate for anything. But it's all I can do now. The monitor started beeping irregularly. The doctor spoke up. You need to say goodbye. There isn't much time left. My mother grabbed his hand again. Dad, we love you. That won't change. I've changed who you thought I was, he whispered. No. It was my uncle Roberto who spoke, his voice firm despite the tears. You made a terrible mistake when you were young. A mistake that has haunted you your whole life. But you've spent 50 years trying to be a good person. Being a present father. A loving grandfather. Working honestly. That counts too. Will you forgive me? he asked like a frightened child. We love you, Dad, my mother replied. And we're going to do what you asked. We're going to find that woman. We're going to tell her everything. We're going to try to do the right thing. A tiny smile appeared on his face. Perhaps the first genuine smile in decades. Anna, I'm going to see my Anna now. And I'll be able to tell her the truth. No lies. Finally, her eyes began to close. Her breathing became increasingly labored. I loved you all. Truly. This was never a lie. And then silence. The monitor emitted a continuous sound. The doctor checked the pulse, the vital signs. He looked at us and simply nodded, confirming what we already knew. Joaquim Silva, or Enrique Almeida dos Santos, had left, taking with him 50 years of guilt, secrecy, and incomplete redemption. We left that hospital changed. We were no longer the same people who had gone in. Our entire family history had been rewritten in one afternoon. In the days that followed, it was difficult to process everything. The funeral was simple, as he had requested in his will. A few friends, acquaintances from the city. No one from his past, because there was no one left alive from that past. Or at least no one who knew him as Enrique. While we were organizing his things, we found more. Notebooks. Dozens of notebooks where he had written daily for decades. They were like diaries of guilt. Pages and pages about the accident, about the boy Carlos, about his mother, about the regret that never ceased. He lived in hell, my Uncle Marcos said, flipping through one of the notebooks. His whole life was his own prison. 2 weeks later, we did what he asked. We found Dona Conceição's niece. Her name was Patricia Pereira Gomez. She was a history teacher at a state school in Curitiba. We arranged to meet her at a discreet cafe in the city center. I don't know what I expected. Maybe anger. Maybe she would throw us out, yell, curse us. That would be understandable. But when we told her everything, the whole story, without omitting anything, she simply cried. My aunt went crazy when her cousin died, she said, her voice breaking. My mother told me she was never the same. She would scream Carlos's name at night. She said she saw his face in every boy on the street. We delivered Grandpa's letter. Patricia read in silence. Tears streamed down her face. When she finished, she just stared at the paper for a long time. Do you know how many nights my mother stayed awake wondering who had killed Carlos? How many years did she seek justice? She died without ever knowing. We are very sorry, was all I could manage to say. She looked at us, and there was something strange in her gaze. It wasn't exactly anger. It was complex. He suffered, she said, more as a statement than a question. Every day, my mother replied. Every minute. Patricia folded the letter carefully. Aunt Conceição used to say something, in her lucid moments. She said she didn't want revenge. She just wanted the person who did that to understand what they had taken from her. To feel the pain. She looked at us intently. It seems he sensed it. We talked for hours in that cafe. We recounted the life Grandpa had built. About how he was a devoted father, a loving grandfather. About the clocks he repaired, as if each one were an attempt to turn back time. About how he lived 50 years carrying that weight. Patricia spoke about her family. About how Carlos's death had destroyed not only Dona Conceição, but the entire family structure. Her grandfather never got over losing his son. He died 5 years later of heartbreak, they said. The family scattered, each one trying to escape that pain that seemed contagious. Do you know what's saddest? Patricia said at one point. 2 lives were destroyed that night. Carlos's, who never had a chance to live, and his grandfather's, who lived, but never truly lived. That phrase kept echoing in my head for days. When we said goodbye, something unexpected happened. Patricia hugged my mother. It was a long, tight hug. When they let go, they were both crying. Thank you for telling me the truth, Patricia said. Thank you for having the courage to confess before he died. Many people take these secrets to the grave. He wanted you to know that you were remembered, that your family's pain was not forgotten, my mother replied. On the way back to Sao Paulo, we remained silent in the car, each one lost in their own thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about how a single moment can change so many lives. 1 second of recklessness, and 2 entire families were affected for generations. Do you think he found peace? I asked suddenly. My uncle Roberto, who was driving, thought for a moment before answering. I think he found the courage to try. And maybe that's what matters. Months have passed. Life went on as it always does. But we were different. I noticed it in small things. My mother started volunteering with NGOs that support traffic accident victims. My uncle Marcos became a staunch advocate for stricter laws against reckless drivers. Roberto started going to schools to talk about responsibility and the consequences of our actions. And me? I started writing, documenting the story, not to expose Grandpa, but so that Carlos's story wouldn't be forgotten, and to show that even the most imperfect people can try to do the right thing. 6 months after Grandpa's death, something surprising happened. Patricia called us. She said she had been thinking a lot, especially about forgiveness, about justice, about what her aunt would have wanted. Did you know that the City Hall is doing renovations at Carlos Pereira Park? She asked. We didn't know. They're going to make a new plaque, one that tells more of his story. And I wanted to include something, if you'll allow me. She wanted to add a message about forgiveness, about how the pain of the accident affected 2 families, about how holding on to anger for generations doesn't bring anyone back, about how Carlos, who loved to play and dreamed of being a teacher like his mother, would live forever in the memory of everyone who visited that park. And there's something else, she continued. The money from your grandfather's donation, part of it will fund scholarships for underprivileged children to study, in the names of Carlos Pereira and Joaquim Silva. My mother couldn't speak. She just cried. He spent his whole life trying to make up for what he did, Patricia said softly. And I think my aunt, wherever she is, would understand that. The pain won't go away. Carlos won't come back. But maybe we can transform this tragedy into something that helps other people. It was at that moment that I understood. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about saying everything is okay. Forgiveness is choosing not to let hatred and pain define the rest of our story. A year later, we all went to the unveiling of the new plaque in the park. It was a sunny Saturday morning. The park was full of children playing, families having picnics. Life was happening as it should. The plaque was beautiful. It had a picture of Carlos, a boy with a wide smile and bright eyes. It said that he had died tragically in an accident, but that his spirit lived on through the trees in the park, the laughter of the children, and the stories we shared. And below, in smaller letters, the message Patricia had written. This park is a reminder that our choices have consequences that echo beyond what we can see. But it is also a symbol that even from the greatest pain, we can choose to plant seeds of forgiveness, understanding, and hope for the future. Patricia was there, of course. We greeted each other like old friends. And, in a way, we were united by a tragedy that happened decades before we were born, but which shaped our lives in ways we never could have imagined. Do you think they're at peace now? She asked, looking up at the sky. Carlos, his aunt, his grandfather, my grandmother Conceição? I watched the children playing. One of them was about the same age Carlos was when he died. She was laughing, chasing butterflies, completely oblivious to the weight of that place's history. I think they want us to live, I replied, that we learn from the past, but not be prisoners of it. That night, I returned to the apartment and sat down at my desk. I picked up one of Grandpa's notebooks. It was from 2018, 7 years before he died. I opened it to a random page and read, "Today I fixed a 1950s pocket watch. The mechanism was completely jammed. I spent 4 hours cleaning, adjusting, getting it working again. When I finally heard the ticking, I felt that familiar pang. Because I know that no watch I fix will go back to 1965. Will make that boy get up. Will bring his mother back to her senses. Will give me the chance to make the right choice. But even so, I keep fixing them. Because maybe, somehow, it means that time didn't completely stop that night. That there is still a future, even for someone like me." I carefully closed the notebook, And finally I understood my grandfather. He wasn't fixing clocks. He was fixing himself. Piece by piece. Second by second. Knowing he would never be whole again, but trying anyway.